What happens when the poorest kid in the room watches the richest men in the world operate up close, takes notes, and then builds something bigger than all of them combined? In 1901, J.P. Morgan wrote Andrew Carnegie a personal check for $480 million. To understand what that number actually meant, don't think about inflation. Think about proportion. That single check represented nearly 2% of the entire US GDP at the time. Adjust for that today, and you're looking at over $480 billion. More than Jeff Bezos, Larry Ellison, and Bill Gates combined. Carnegie looked at it, smiled, and told Morgan he'd spend the rest of his life giving every last dollar away. He actually did it. This is a story about an immigrant kid who arrived in America with nothing, outmaneuvered the most powerful industrialists on the planet, and then turned his entire fortune into libraries, universities, and peace funds before he ever let the dirt touch his coffin. The system didn't break him. He studied it until he owned it. Then he gave it back. It's 1835, and in Dunfermline, Scotland, a boy named Andrew Carnegie is born into a family of handloom weavers. His father, Will, is a proud and hardworking man who weaves damask linen by hand in a small cottage. But the Industrial Revolution isn't waiting for anyone, and the power loom tears through the textile trade like a wrecking ball. By the time Andrew is 11, his family is broke and out of options. His mother, Margaret, is the one who makes the call. She borrows money from relatives, packs up everything they own, and moves the family to Allegheny, Pennsylvania, where her sisters had already settled. Andrew Carnegie arrives in America at 12 years old, speaking with a Scottish accent, wearing secondhand clothes, with essentially nothing to his name. That's the starting point. Within weeks of landing, he's working in a cotton factory as a bobbin boy, replacing spools of thread on a spinning machine for $1.20 a week. The work is brutal and the hours are long, but Carnegie isn't sitting there feeling sorry for himself. He's watching. He notices which men get promoted, how they talk, what they read, and who they know. He teaches himself bookkeeping in his free time. When he hears that a local telegraph office is looking for a messenger boy, he jumps at it because it pays slightly more and gets him out of the factory. He memorizes every street in Pittsburgh so he can deliver faster than anyone else. He teaches himself Morse code by ear before he's ever formally trained. By 15, he's one of the best telegraph operators in the city. In 1853, a man named Thomas Scott notices Carnegie and hires him as his personal secretary and telegraph operator at the Pennsylvania Railroad. Scott is a powerful executive, and he treats Carnegie almost like a protege, walking him through how capital moves, how decisions get made at the top, and why timing matters more than almost anything else. Carnegie watches wealthy investors funnel money into railroad ties, oil wells, and sleeping car companies, and he realizes that the people who get rich aren't necessarily the ones doing the most physical work. They're the ones placing the right bets at the right time. Scott actually loans Carnegie money to make his first investment, shares in the Adams Express Company. And then the dividend check arrives, and something clicks permanently in his head. By the late 1860s, Carnegie is doing well for himself. He's got a hand in railroads, iron bridges, and oil, and he's pulling in decent money. But he's watching post-Civil War America rebuild itself from the ground up, and he sees the one thing the country cannot get enough of: steel. Not iron, steel. It's stronger, more flexible, and far better for building the kind of infrastructure a rapidly expanding nation needs. The problem is that steel is still expensive and slow to produce. Then Carnegie hears about the Bessemer process, a method that burns off the carbon content of pig iron fast, efficiently, and at massive scale. Other industrialists know about it. Very few are willing to bet the house on it. In 1875, he opens the Edgar Thomson Steel Works outside Pittsburgh, built from scratch and designed to be the most cost-efficient steel mill in the world. He obsesses over costs, the way some men obsess over everything else. Every inefficiency gets cut. Every process gets optimized. Here's where Carnegie does something that separates him from everyone else in the industry. He doesn't just make steel. He controls every single step of the process that gets him there. He buys iron ore fields in Minnesota's Mesabi Range. He purchases coal mines and coke ovens. He acquires a fleet of lake steamships to move the ore. He builds his own railroad lines to connect everything together. By the time raw materials enter his operation and finished steel comes out the other end, Carnegie has cut out nearly every middleman that would otherwise take a slice of his margin. His competitors are buying inputs from suppliers and paying a premium at every stage. Carnegie owns the suppliers. He can undersell anyone in the market and still make money. By the early 1890s, Carnegie Steel is producing more steel than all of Great Britain. He's the single most powerful man in American industry. But here's where the story gets complicated. Carnegie had spent years publicly positioning himself as a friend of the working man, writing essays about how laborers deserve to share in the profits of the companies they built. In 1892, a wage dispute breaks out at his Homestead Steelworks outside Pittsburgh. Carnegie conveniently leaves for Scotland. He puts his ruthless partner, Henry Clay Frick, in charge of handling it. Frick hires 300 armed Pinkerton agents to break the strike. The workers are waiting for them when they arrive by barge on the Monongahela River. What follows is one of the bloodiest labor conflicts in American history, with gunfights, deaths on both sides, and the Pennsylvania National Guard eventually called in to crush the Union. Carnegie's public image never fully recovers. In 1900, J.P. Morgan approaches Carnegie with a proposition. Morgan is trying to consolidate the entire American steel industry into a single massive corporation, and Carnegie's operation is the piece he can't build around. Carnegie is 65 years old, exhausted and ready to be done with it. He writes a number on a piece of paper and hands it to Morgan's intermediary. The number is $480 million. Morgan receives it and agrees without negotiating. He reportedly tells Carnegie afterward, "Congratulations, Mr. Carnegie. You are now the richest man in the world." Carnegie's company becomes the foundation of US Steel, the first corporation in American history capitalized at over $1 billion. Now here's the part that nobody does. Carnegie actually means it when he says he's giving it all away. He had written something called The Gospel of Wealth back in 1889, in which he argued, publicly and plainly, that a man who dies rich dies disgraced, that wealth sitting in a dead man's estate is a failure of moral imagination. After 1901, Carnegie treats it as a binding personal contract. He begins giving at a pace and scale that the world has never seen from a living person. Between 1901 and his death in 1919, Carnegie funds the construction of 2,509 free public libraries across the United States, Canada, Britain, and beyond. His logic is simple. He'd educated himself for free at a private library in Pittsburgh as a young man, and he believed every child in the world deserved the same shot. He endows Carnegie Hall in New York City and founds Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh. He pours money into the Carnegie Institution for Science, the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, and pension funds for university professors who had spent careers building knowledge for modest pay. He finances the building of 7,000 church organs. He funds a hero fund to give money to ordinary people who risk their lives saving others. When he dies in 1919 at the age of 83, he has less than $1 million left to his name. Chuck Feeney, the duty-free billionaire who gave away $8 billion in secret over decades, later said Carnegie was the original blueprint. Warren Buffett said Feeney would get done in his lifetime what it would take Buffett 12 years after death to accomplish, and Feeney himself pointed back to Carnegie as the man who made the idea credible. The giving pledge that Bill Gates and Buffett launched in 2010 traces its intellectual lineage directly to an essay a Scottish immigrant wrote in 1889 after spending his whole life proving that a poor kid with no advantages and no connections could build the most powerful company in the world, and that none of it meant anything unless you gave it back. If Carnegie's story changed the way you think about wealth and legacy, hit subscribe. We break down the hidden financial moves behind history's greatest fortunes every week. Like this video if you want more stories like this one, and drop a comment below telling us who we should cover next.